All right, welcome everyone. And first and foremost, I'd love to say happy International Women's Day. We're so happy to spend it with you guys here. And I hope the next hour and a half can be productive and helpful, and we can leave with a few new contacts and connections. So I would like to introduce our moderator, and she will go ahead and introduce the rest of our panelists. So Deyanira Martinez is a very lovely friend of mine. She is the Vice President of NAHJ New York City, and a beautiful person all around. This is not part of her bio, she didn't write that, I did. But Deyanira is a freelance bilingual journalist. She's an author, strategist, speaker, entrepreneur. She's the CEO and founder of Bella Media Corporation, which is a content and media agency, as well as a TV entrepreneur. Side note, she also has a fantastic YouTube channel with so much of her work on there. Shameless plug, look her up, Deyanira Martinez. She's the author of the book El Arte de Atreverse and a co-author of 3 other publications. Deyanira is the vice president, which I mentioned, of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and the co-chair of the New York Times Latino ERG group. Deyanira holds a journalism degree from La Universidad Central del Este and a degree from the business administration from Queens College, the City University of New York. And it's my pleasure to introduce her. Deyanira.
Hello, and good evening. Thank you, Natalie, for that nice and lovely introduction. I am really nervous because I am so excited with the wonderful speakers that we have today. It's such an honor and privilege to be here with you all today. On behalf of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, I just want to welcome all of you. One of our missions is to build bridges of collaboration and empowerment among members, to create connections with women in media who has made their life work to amplify Latina voices in journalism. Our community of Latina journalism in 2021 have endured through racial and sexy biases to develop rewarding careers in the media landscape that is perpetually changing. Now we must also contend with a global pandemic that some scientists are predicting that will end in 7 years. Imagine that. This panel will discuss how women journalists can continue to stay connected and network in ways that are fulfilling professionally and personally. And it's a privilege to introduce to you today our incredible panelists. And it's also a privilege to be in a virtual event like this, in a virtual stage with all of you. I have so much admiration for Rebecca, for Mariana, and for Andrea. Our first panelist is Rebecca Aguilar. She's the founder of Latinas in Journalism, president-elect of the Society of Professional Journalists. She's a multi-Emmy award-winning reporter. She spent 28 years in television news and has been a freelance journalist since 2008. Throughout her time as a reporter, she has mentored and championed diversity, equality, and inclusion in newsrooms. In 2016, she started Latinas in Journalism on Facebook to help Latinas find jobs and employers find them. In 2020, Aguilar made history with the Society of Professional Journalists, SPJ, by becoming both the first Latina and woman of color to be elected president in the 100+ years history of the organization. Imagine that, 100 years to have a Latina and a woman of color. And it was our dear Rebecca, which is here with us today. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Andrea Gonzalez-RAMIREZ. Andrea Gonzalez-RAMIREZ is a New York City-based journalist from Vega Alta, Puerto Rico. She's currently a senior staff writer at Gem Medium, officials magazine about politics, power, and culture. Gonzalez-RAMIREZ is also the founder of the Latinas in Journalism Mentorship Program. She has been an expert commentator on CBS, MSNBC, the Mother Jones podcast, The Takeaway, and other outlets. Her work has been in Refinery 29, Latino USA, El Diario Nueva York, Centro Voces, among others. Gonzalez-RAMIREZ is one of the authors of AOC, The Fearless Rise of Power and Power. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous to have you, and I'm so excited to have you, guys. And Powerful Renounces of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from St. Martin's Press, and in 2019-2020, Ida B. Walsh Fellow at Type Investigation. She holds a Master of Journalism with a concentration on international reporting from the Craig Newark Graduate School of Journalism, and a magna cum laude from the University of Puerto Rico. Welcome, Andrea. It's a pleasure to have you. Our third panelist, last but not least, is Mariana Atencio. Mariana is a Peabody Award-winning news personality, author, and motivational speaker, as well as the co-founder of Go Like, a multimedia production company, Go Like Mariana. She has worked as news anchor and national correspondent on television for a decade in both English and Spanish. Mariana's TED Talk, What Makes You Special, has been viewed almost 40 million times and translated into 13 languages. Her first book, Perfectly You, Embracing the Power of Being Real, was an Amazon bestseller. She's a 2020 Henry Crow Fellow, partner with the American Latino Museum, and served on the Leadership Council of Voto Latino. Welcome. We couldn't ask for a better panel. It's great to have you, ladies.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
We want to start by asking each one of you to talk about your individual initiatives and how are these initiatives supporting Latinas in media? Mariana, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I'll start. Buenas noches, mi gente. Ladies, it's such an honor to be with you today. I can't imagine a better way to close out International Women's Day. Así que gracias por la invitación. The first thing that I will say, though, not necessarily pertaining to your question, but it's something that I realized today and I'm so proud of. The three women that are having this conversation with me tonight, Deyanira, Rebecca, and Andrea, have been women that have helped me in moments where I have needed a strong network of support, those bridges that we talk about tonight. So they are an incredible example of that. And I think that if we can build more bridges like the ones that we're seeing tonight, we can definitely make the change for Latina storytellers out there. So thank you, ladies, for coming to my aid when I needed you, cuando les levanté el teléfono, and we'll talk more about that and why it's so important. But in terms of what I'm doing to support Latinas in media, like Deyanira said in reading my bio, I left a 10-year career in traditional media on national networks like Univision, and especially later the past 4 years at NBC and MSNBC, because I felt that Latina stories weren't being told as authentically, weren't being told in a way that really represents the demographic changes that we're seeing in this country, the communities that are underreported. So at one point, me quejaba tanto, and I didn't do anything about it. And then you start getting sort of complacent. You're like, okay, I'll just keep doing my job and I'll keep doing the stories that I'm assigned. And then one day you wake up and you say, well, if I'm complaining so much about the fact that these stories aren't being told in a way that's more authentic, that's more reflective of our communities, why don't I do it? Me remangué las manos, and I garnered the courage to leave that comfy traditional media job and to start my own production company, Go Like, which is dedicated, I'm proud to say, to telling Latino stories in a positive way, in an authentic way. Everybody on this company is a woman and is a Latina. So I'm very proud to be hiring and mentoring Latinas as well.
That's great. Rebecca, I heard that you are a fearless Latina, that your father used to tell you, no fear, no miedo, desde que estaba chiquita. Tell us about you and all the amazing things that you have done to help Latinas in media.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and the NHJ New York chapter, New York City chapter. I think you guys are amazing. I think you're all women, aren't you?
Yes.
All the boys?
All the boys.
Congratulations on that. And I want to say happy International Women's Day. And so, yeah, going back to my father and mother were your undocumented workers who came into this country. My mother became an American citizen. My father passed away before his wish came true. But during their time here, both of them became migrant rights activists, civil rights activists, union leaders. And so our weekends were spent not going to the mall. There was no such thing as summer camps. We were at protests, marches, rallies as little kids. I remember one time we wanted to go to see this little baseball game, and my father's like, no, vamos a Campbell's Soup. And we were like, okay. And so we were outside Campbell's Soup. And one of my friends here, Lupe Velasquez, Lupe, she's coming in from Ohio. She knows that, my father used to say that. And so we'd be in front of, I'm a little kid in front of Campbell's Soups with a sign, and we're marching around. And so I remember as a child also hearing my father tell others, No tengan miedo. Don't be afraid. Pónganse allí. Get in there. And usen su voz. Use your voice. And so it was very easy for me to be unafraid, to be bold, to be willing to sacrifice my job. Because believe me, I have sacrificed my job to do what is needed for us, not only as Latinas, but as a community of immigrants and a community of Latinx, not just for Mexicans, not just for Mexican Americans or Chicanos or whatever we want to call ourselves today. And so, yeah, so going back to what we have done or what I have done, I hope I have not left journalism because I want to show people out there that we belong in your newsrooms and you will not drive me out. I have a voice. I have brown skin for a reason. And I'm going to make sure, whether you like it or not, whether you fire me, whether you lay me off, whether you don't put me on your friends list, that I will be in your face. Because I know there's many Latinas out there that won't do it because they do work in fear. And I understand that. And so that's why I want to champion for them. That's why I started Latinas in Journalism, because even among us, there is a Latino Voice Club. It is there. And sometimes we have to break their doors too. And so I've started 2 groups, Wise Latinas Link that has about 9,000 women on Facebook, and Latinas in Journalism that has about 2,000. Not only to help journalists, but to help all Latinas. Because you know what? We deserve it. We deserve equal pay, equal say, and equal opportunities. And I think, I was telling my husband that I'll probably go to my grave fighting till that last breath for all of us. That will be my satisfaction. Thank you.
Love it. Andrea, what about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey from Vega Alta, Puerto Rico to the US to become such an amazing writer and media personality.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. It's just so inspiring to be in a space where it's all Latinas all together. Mariana and Rebecca are both 2 amazing journalists that I admire so much. Rebecca's group actually was the inspiration for our mentorship program. Last fall, we launched a mentorship program for Latinas. I see a few people here who are mentors with us. Right now, we have 58 mentors who offer coaching sessions or long-term mentorships to other Latinas in the industry. So it doesn't matter your career level. It doesn't matter whether you're a freelancer or a staffer, whether you do video or photo or you're a writer. Like, we created this community with the idea that everyone should have access to mentorship. My mentors are amazing women of color, but I've never had a Latina mentor, and I'm in New York. So that's one of the things that I think about a lot. And I feel like a lot of other people, especially who are mid-career like myself or just starting out, might find themselves in that same situation, especially if they're in newsrooms that are majority white, because like, unfortunately, we're still such a minority of so many of these spaces. So the program is just a way to connect people with mentors and ensure that, you know, doesn't matter if you need help with your resume or applying to a fellowship or, you know, you're asking for a raise, that you're going to have someone there in your corner who is going to help you take that next step in your career. And yeah, so grateful that places like NHA exist, like resources like this exist for people like me who moved to New York with no connections. You know, I had no idea about media. Just came here to do my master's and stayed, and I have been able to get to this point in my career because of the amazing wisdom and grace of my mentors. So we're trying to just like pay it forward for Latinos because we deserve it. Like, we deserve to have a seat at the table and we deserve to have a voice in our newsrooms.
Love it. I would like everyone to put your LinkedIn link or Instagram link so we can all connect and continue this great collaboration. I see that Rebecca also put her information down. Mucho se habla de alianzas estratégicas. Tell us about the power of strategic alliances among Latinas women in media. Do they really work? Are we still competing for the spotlight, or do we still want to be the only Latina in the room? I see a lot of people, I'm the only Latina, and since I'm the only one, I don't want anybody else. How does that work for you guys?
I think strategic alliances are, in one word, strategic alliances among Latinas, in one word, game changer. Me personally, the Latinas that have helped me have really changed my life, from Janelle Rodriguez, who was actually the person who went out on a limb for me and hired me at NBC and MSNBC, coming from Univision, never having reported in English really before for breaking news. Pero the one relationship, going to back to what Andrea was talking about, that has been just del cielo a la tierra in my life, is the one with my current business partner at GoLike, Mirna, una panameña espectacular, who began as my mentor and now has turned into my business partner, because at one point we looked at each other and we're like, okay, we've been supporting each other for 6 years. We've seen the benefits that this relationship has, you know, proven in our lives, and with the stories that we want to tell. We're passionate about supporting Latinas, so let's go and create this media company. And having her as somebody whose hand I can hold, being like, bueno, si nos lanzamos juntas. If we fail together. If we are figuring it out, you know, I didn't know anything. As Andrea said, like, I also came to this country from Venezuela with no connections in media. Cuando ella me dijo, you have to write a book, I'm like, what? ¿Tú te volviste loca? I didn't know anything about the book world. She's like, I'll be here. And it's that person. O sea, that's what strategic relationships among Latinas can do. It's having that tribe that you can turn to. It's having a Rebecca with the groups that she mentioned, the Wise Latinas in journalism, where you're like, can I put a message in a bottle out there? And you get this like wave, this tsunami of support, and you know that it's not just you out there. And as far as the only Latina in the room, if we don't only get a seat at the table, but leave more seats for other Latinas and make sure that we leave that door wide open for other Latinas, estamos pelando. Our community is never going to get to where we need it to get to. I think the more that we prove to these white executives, white male executives for the most part, that our stories are successful because we make other Latinas succeed, that just opens the door for everybody. We need to rally around all our projects in order for, you know, our own ventures to succeed. So it's not about being the only, it's about making that table bigger for all of us.
Let me follow up on that. Very well said, Mariana. I think that one of the things that's important is Latinas. I don't think I've ever had like a strategy, you know, I don't think strategic. I just think connecting. I mean, if I see a Latina at Costco, I'm going to connect with her. I don't know, she could be, you know, somebody I may talk to on a story. She may be someone who can help me. She may be someone that, you know, I may say, hey, you need to join one of my groups. So I really don't think strategy. What I think is about connecting with Latinas and helping them. Because in the end, whoever I help, then there's always going to be someone else that's going to help me. I really believe in that whole system of what comes around goes around. I really do believe in that. But, you know, one of the things about being the only Latina in the newsroom, which I worked in 7 newsrooms around the country, in 7 TV newsrooms. And, well, in the cities that have predominant a lot of Latinos, I was never the only one. But I always happened to be the only one who would speak up. I remember it happened in Los Angeles. It happened in San Antonio. It happened in Phoenix. It was always the, you know, and I would always think, God, is that Rebecca being a rebeldona? But it wasn't that. It wasn't that, you know, it was me. I realized that Latinas, some of us have been raised to shut the hell up. And for me, it's like, no, you shut the hell up. It's not that way for me. And so I always seemed that, I mean, I could show you all the times I was written up in newsrooms with, get this quote, I wish I had them, because it'd be like, Rebecca has an attitude, or Rebecca seems to be causing conflict. I think sometimes those are code words, like, you know, this is a Latina who talks too much and we want to shut her up. So when you're in a newsroom and you're the only one, it is a big responsibility, but try to find your voice. And if you don't know how to find it, find someone that can help you grow it. In the past 3 weeks, I've had 3 Latinas call me, one from Arizona, one from Wisconsin, and one from California, basically asking me to help them talk them off the ledge because they are the only Latinas in their newsrooms. And so you also have to be there if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a connector, if you truly want to be a great mentor, then be there when they need you more than just talking job. They need you to talk about. The other day, I was talking to this woman from Arizona. I pick up the phone. She messaged me on Facebook. I really need to talk to you, Miss Rebecca. I always know when they're very young because they call me Miss Rebecca. And I was like, call me now. And, you know, I don't know where I was. I think I was in the kitchen. And she called me and she was already crying. And I'm like, okay, first of all, first thing I'm going to tell you, look in the mirror. You're a beautiful person. Number 2, you're smart. Number 3, this is just one job. Number 4, don't let them get in your head. Don't. Because she was hyperventilating already. I felt her pain. I've been there. I've cried. All of you have cried. You know it.
Yeah, I have cried.
I have cried, definitely.
So just what I'm saying is, if you're the only woman in the newsroom, the only Latina, and you feel like, I can't fight this myself, I can't bring other people in, then start finding the Marianas, start finding me, find people that, you know, been there, done that, and will listen. Because the day you are the Latina who doesn't listen, then you should get out of the business, because we don't need you. Thank you.
What do you say, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, hard to follow this too. But yeah, I feel like I think it is about connections more than thinking strategically, right? And developing those bonds with people who have similar views to you, have similar experiences to you, and can understand. I feel like, you know, I've gotten a lot out of having mentors and peers who, I don't know, like at my previous job, I was making $15,000 less than my 2 white coworkers. And the only reason I found out was because we were having dinner one day, and over drinks, we just started sharing our salaries. And that felt so revolutionary at the moment. And then I was like, we should be doing this all the time. We should be, you know, sharing information about jobs, about whose editor is hiring right now, about how much are you making, and just like that came like more naturally through us just having a connection as co-workers and loving each other and like understanding each other. And I feel like you can really develop those relationships outside of the workplace too. And I think that, you know, with our mentorship program, what we do is like our mentees have 2 options. They can just do a coaching session, or they can, you know, continue developing a relationship with a mentor. And once those relationships are set, like they are very, very fulfilling. Like I feel like I've learned so much from my mentees, even though they think that they are the ones learning, right? I think especially as someone who is still pretty early in her career, right? Like just having that wisdom from other people is like super crucial. So yeah, developing those bonds and ensuring that we are not competing against each other. I feel like so many other communities don't compete against each other, right? Like white men are not looking at other white men as their like competition. So we should not be fighting for scraps. We should be ensuring that, you know, once we get into a position where we have a little bit of power, just take advantage of that and make sure that we're bringing other people into our newsrooms.
Other people like us. Exactly, other people like us, because eventually those are the connections that we are going to need to keep moving up. I'm sure that you all heard the news. All the media companies now want to be diverse. All of a sudden they realize that they were not diverse enough. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel this is something real? This is just part of some sort of a movement now? And how do you fight for equality and representation, or complain without being blacklisted or perceived as the loud, crazy Latina? That Rebecca is always making troubles. How do you do that?
I'm going to jump in on this one first, you guys, just because I've been hearing it. I've been hearing diversity and, well, not inclusion, but diversity since the 1980s, before some of you guys were even born. And it's gotten to the point, and I say this often to even non-Latino groups, that I think sometimes, and again, I'm just putting it out there, my husband's white, so I have nothing against white people, but I think people, especially non-people of color, they tend to use diversity because it makes them feel warm and fuzzy. I'm doing something. When I hear the D word, it's like, okay, here we go, lip service. So, you know, it is unfortunate that the landscape, fortunate and unfortunate, you know, the death of George Floyd really changed things. And yes, it just seemed that suddenly news managers, especially the ones that were not people of color, they're like, whoa, what has been going on? Our
How come I didn't realize?
right, I didn't know you African Americans felt like this. Oh, you Latinos feel like this? And if it was suddenly like they did, they woke up, right? And my biggest fear right now is that suddenly everybody's in this frenzy. Like today, I got a call from a big company saying they're looking for a diversity and inclusion officer. They're all looking for it, right? But I hope it's not something that it's just trendy to talk about. And then in a couple of years, it's like, we're back to the same old way. So, you know, while I want to be positive about this, I'm very cautious about this whole movement. But again, as Latinas, whether it's the wave of trendiness, diversity, inclusion, what's important for us is just to push forward. That while it may be lip service, or it may be a realistic movement by the other society, that we continue to push forward, that we continue being the voice in the newsroom, that we continue having production houses like Mariana, who has her own, that we continue saying, yes, I'm a leader. Look at me seriously. That is why I really appreciate the Society of Professional Journalists. SPJ, the majority are white members. But what they said as a whole is, you know what, we really need change here. I would not be the next president in September if they did not believe in change. So there are people out there that are white, that are really true to the word. We want diversity and inclusion, and we're going to make it happen. I don't know, Mariana, what do you think?
Hi, congratulations. We're going to be cheering you on. You deserve it.
Thank you.
You were absolutely right. Hit the nail on the head on so many points. Andrea, with what you said before, like we tear each other down so much. Nosotros mismos, o sea, we have to stop that. We have to stop that as a community. I think in terms of journalism, para mí is still baffling how Rebecca can be the only in many of the newsrooms she mentioned in cities like Phoenix, o sea, where like the amount of Latinos, it's just not reflective of that. I was the only Latina on MSNBC in the time that I was there. And then, okay, a Mariana leaves, so let's replace a Mariana for an Alicia or a Paola. So we're basically like, there's one slot that is just being like, we're being switched out, right? Instead of there being like more Latinas on the table. And that just doesn't make any sense, doesn't reflect the 60+ million Latinos in this country. I looked at some of the figures for our discussion today, and it's dismal. It's something like, it's like 5.8% Latinos depicted in media. Most of the stories are about crime, are about the border. That's according to a study by USC Annenberg. That's just not reflective of who we are. So how do we change the discussion? And it's something that I discuss a lot now with groups like, and companies like Microsoft that are hiring me to really think about diversity in a real way and inclusion in a real way. And what I tell them is it's super important for us to find allies in other communities, especially in other minorities and communities of color. We do that enough. For me, it was a turning point at a place like MSNBC to have people like Joy Reid, to have anchors like Ali Elshi, who told me, every time you have a story, bring it to me and I will put it on the air. And it's realizing like, wow, so I can't keep preaching to the choir to my Univision family and community, who I love, but they already know what's happening with our community. I need to find allies in other communities, especially communities of color who I can really learn from in a very humble way. So I think that is critically important. And making the Latino experience, I don't have to tell you guys this, it's what I tell the white executives, the Latino experience is so vibrant and joyful. And it's our community, who doesn't want to be a part of our community? So let's make our fiesta, our Latino fiesta, an inclusive one, where we can make them be a part of our stories and the music that we hear and the food that we eat and our family values. So we have to make other communities feel included in our experience.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think in the last summer specifically, one of the reasons why diversity and inclusion became such a buzzword was because companies suffered, like their bottom line was hit, right? Like newsrooms saw a ton of like scandals about like racism within these institutions, like other companies face the same outside of media. So they actually had a financial incentive to start getting more of us in the room. I don't know how much that trend is gonna last, but I do think that it's our opportunity to really get in the room and start pushing. I've had conversations with my editors, like I'm the only Latina in my team. And it kind of sucks sometimes, right? Like, for example, in previous jobs, I had to cover immigration. I am Puerto Rican. Puerto Ricans are US citizens. I've never been an immigrant, so I cannot understand that process, right? But just because you're the only Latina in the room, sometimes you get anointed with like, oh, you have to be the expert on like all these communities and all these issues. And I think another fact that we should bring up to our newsrooms executives and like our leadership is that having a diverse newsroom makes our journalism better. Like there are less blind spots. Like the way that we cover stories are as if our communities are made up by three-dimensional beings, not like these characters that cross the border and now like involved with drugs and like, you know, came in a little Yola to the United States. Like, and that to me is like so important because sometimes so many aspects of our communities get erased by the fact that we are not there in the room. I think a lot about this story that came out in a pretty big national newspaper a few years ago, where it was about this little chicken factory in Pennsylvania, where 95% of that community was white. But the majority of the workers in this chicken factory were Latinos. And the way it was written, it was as if it was the invasion of the brown people, just like making this like white subject so uncomfortable, like they were taking her jobs and all this drama. And as I was reading the story, I was just like, there were no Latinos in a newsroom, like no one read this to ensure that, you know, the way that we were being portrayed was balanced and had context and it was not perpetuating all these stereotypes. So yeah, I don't know if executives are gonna get bored of the diversity inclusion initiatives in a few months, but in the meantime, I think that this is the time for us to start bringing up our peers' resumes, start being like, hey, mira, fulanita, like, she's such a great journalist. You should, you know, like, do you want her to pitch you? Or like, oh, I'm gonna give you her email so you can connect with her. And I think that this is like really the moment for us to like grab the opportunity since it's there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk about what Andrea said that's important. And I love what she said about bringing people in. You also have to be the Latina that's not selfish, that's not afraid. Oh my God, here comes Rebecca Aguilar. She's gonna outshine me. I better not help her.
She already won 50 awards, so I have no chance.
No, but you know what I mean. I mean, what happened is, I would see like in my TV newsroom in Dallas, when any Latino or Latino would walk in, I'd be like, hey, you know, let's go get un cafecito over there. And I give them the lowdown. Hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. Do you speak Spanish? Blah, blah, blah. I'd let them know. Ask me anything. What do you want to know? You know, and I would tell them, look, I've been here 10 years, 12 years, whatever. The reason why is this. But I also saw people in the newsroom, Latinas, who were selfish, and Latinos who were selfish. They wouldn't help the fellow Latino because it's like, oh, you know, what if he gets that big story? We can't think like that. It's true. You know, I mean, Mariana was talking about, you know, people tearing each other apart. We got to help each other. You can't be afraid that, you know, someone's going to get the lead story over you. The bottom line is we're in there in that newsroom together, and we should work together, not be like, oh my gosh, here she comes. She's going to take my story. She's going to become an anchor before me. You got to stop with those insecurities because it messes with your head and it will mess with your career. And so I've seen it, and that's why I wanted to share that. Because I think I've been around this long because, you know, I'm happy with myself. I'm confident with myself. I don't look like, you know, I don't think, oh my gosh, there's Mariana, look at her. She's so gorgeous. I don't want to have anything to do with her. You got to look at it like, hey, Mariana, you know, when she came into my city, I didn't know her. But man, we were like sisters before she left, you know, and that's how it should be.
I love that advice. That's the way it's supposed to be. Let's talk about mistakes. Tropezones, metidas de patas. What mistakes have you made in your career that you can tell all the ladies in the audience now, please don't do that. What do you learn from those mistakes? Or in any way, those mistakes help you to be where you are today?
Bueno, the big one for me, and Rebecca, thank you for what you said. Thank you. I still remember that moment. One of the first times that I was going into your city in a bookstore for my book tour. And I'm like, is anybody going to show up? And she's like, she took me out to a beautiful restaurant. We had some live music, and we're going to give back to that restaurant tonight after the conversation wraps. But anyway, mistakes, metidas de pata. The most important thing that I would tell everybody that's listening to us right now, don't blend in. Don't try to blend in and disguise your Latinidad, because that's what I first did when I started doing English speaking television. Y eso doesn't serve anybody and won't make you stand out, and also won't make room for other Latinas that are coming after you. There's one video, I think it's still on YouTube, that I did when I interviewed Ariana Huffington, and I thought that it would sound sort of more American if I said, this is Mariana, and this is how I thrive, because it was for her Thrive book. And I look at that video nowadays, and I'm like, who the heck is Mariana? I don't know. That's not me. My name is Mariana del Carmen Atencio Cervoni. That's the name my parents gave me. So it took me 10 years to realize that if I pronounced my name the way it was meant to be pronounced, if I did my Spanish-English live translation, oh, you've never done that. Yeah, but this is the way I'm going to tell the story, because it's breaking news, because we're in Mexico City, because why are you going to hire a translator or do a voiceover when we can literally give people a voice right now? So the more that you tap into the power of being real, as my book is subtitled, the more that you double down on who you are and what your community represents authentically, the more irreplaceable you're going to be.
Absolutely, being authentic. What about you, Andrea? What was the big mistakes that you wish you have never done?
Damn. I feel like I've had really bad imposter syndrome for the longest time. And it took me a long time to at least acknowledge it, right? I'm still working on it, but at least acknowledge that the way that I sometimes carry myself is like as if I did not work hard enough to get to the position I am today. So a big mistake, I think, has been letting opportunities pass by, like that fellowship, that job that I was like, I'm kind of like underqualified. And then I see that it goes to a person who had like my same level of experience or like less than that. So yeah, I think that at this point in my career, I'm much more confident than I used to be. But when I graduated from grad school, I met my partner in grad school. He's a white man, so he comes with that confidence already in the package. So we were applying to jobs at the same time, right? And in my case, I would be like, okay, so I need 6 out of 10 qualifications. I'm not gonna apply because they're never gonna call me back. And then my boyfriend was just like, woo, Wall Street Journal, woo, NBC, like everything that was up there, because he was like, I'm just gonna try it, right? Like you never know who's gonna see your resume or who's gonna see your name and call you back. And that to me was like a little moment of like, oh, so that's what it's like to be a hombre blanco in los Estados Unidos. Like it makes more sense now. But I think that right now, I just like unlearning that and just recognizing your value, right? Like all of us have gotten to the positions we're in today by working really hard. And if we are in an unstable like situation where you're freelancing or haven't been able to get full-time jobs or you did not get that promotion, that is not an indictment of you or your character. It's like we are really going up against a system that's stacked against us as women and as women of color and as Latinas, as immigrants, like you name it. Like the system is not designed for us. So just like really making sure I feel empowered, that I feel like the power of like being me, right? Like Mariana said, like really tapping into that. I think that that's like one of the most important lessons I've learned the last couple of years.
What about fearless Rebecca? And I love everything that you guys are saying, because I mean, I'm assuming we all can relate so much. It's like you're constantly like, I'm not good enough. I mean, what I'm doing here? How did I get this job? That happened to all of us. Rebecca, how has been your biggest mistake?
You know what? I've been sitting here thinking, what mistakes have I done? And I'm sure some people would say, oh, she burned bridges. You know, I think, yeah, I probably did. But you know what? I would have torched those bridges, because if you're a jerk in this business, don't be connected to me. So sometimes I think it was a white guy who came up with that, don't burn bridges, because I will torch them, just because I don't want a racist idiot that's in the news business connected to me ever. So I don't call that a mistake. If I burned it, it's because I wanted to burn it. Mistakes, gosh, I'm not saying I don't make mistakes, because I do. I think I wish I would have been more in my first job probably, but it takes a moment to, you know, get the groove in, to see what's going on, to be more probably outspoken from the beginning. In the beginning, you're getting to know the groove of a newsroom. Who's what do they do? You know, I remember being hired at the same time that a blonde, beautiful woman was hired. And she went up the ranks, just like that, anchor and everything. Me, it was like struggling to get a full-time job. And at that time, I realized it. She's a beautiful blonde who's still in Toledo, Ohio, still anchoring there. A very wonderful woman. But I realized that, you know, here she is graduating from the same university, same experience as I. She was moving up because she was white, blonde, and beautiful. And for me, it was a whole different thing. So I wish I would have been able to be more outspoken about that. I wish from the beginning, and I say this to many of you, find a mentor. Obviously, when I started in the 80s, there were not many Latinas like I'm seeing today. But find a mentor, find someone, I say, find someone who's white and someone who's a person of color, and a male and a female. Because females are gonna keep it real. You know, they're gonna keep it real. Males, they have their version, which I've learned from them too. But mistakes, yeah, I think those are the mistakes I made. I wish I would have been more vocal in my first job, and I wish I would have found mentors early. And so that's another reason I started Latinas in journalism, because I want to make sure that, you know, that you do find someone to guide you and talk you off the ledge when you need it.
I agree with you, Rebecca, so much. I'm sorry for speaking again on this one, but I think
No, this is.
I was thinking about when you said, like, what mistakes have I made? And I wish, you know, I remember what one of my producers who was white told me when I'm like, why doesn't anybody buy my stories? Like, I don't understand, you know, pitching so hard and I work so hard. And he said, well, it's because you don't have a rabbi here. And I said, rabbi, what's a rabbi? And he said, Mariana, a padrino. Like, you need a padrino. And I remember this phrase that we say so much in Spanish, right? Sin padrino no hay bautizo. Right? And it dawned on me that, of course, was that I didn't have anybody, much like Rebecca said. I had my mentor who was a Latina, who was in journalism on television, an executive, but I also needed that ally that was a white or possibly like a male executive to support me. And you need to get those people. Once you find those people, try and get early buy-in for your stories, right? Don't just, I used to like present a story with like, almost like a PowerPoint presentation with 10 slides, like, ta-da, and this is why it's great. And people are like, okay, this is, ya se cocinó esto. You want people to be invested and also, you know, a part of that cocina, you know what I mean? Make them have early buy-in on your story so that when the story does get pitched and it's on the air, you can say to them, like, we did this, you know?
I just want to say one more. I just want to jump in here real quick. It is so important to have your circle of Latinas that, I mean, don't, you know, people always think, oh God, Rebecca can, you know, she's confident, she's this, she's that. Yeah, I mean, I am. But I also, I mean, I'm seeing Nora Lopez has joined us, you know, the NHJ president. Her and I have been friends since the 80s. We used to compete on stories. And the great thing, hi Nora, the great thing about her is I can call her. You know, I'm the one that said, hey, you need to run for president, because I know she's got that leadership qualities. But I know I can also call her and say, hey, Nora, this is what's going on with me. Whether it's my career, whether it's SPJ, I know she'll keep it real. Because she also knows I don't like people bullshitting me. And she's that kind of person I can talk to. Yvette Davila Richards is another one, she's joined us, that I can talk to. Because they know, they don't look at me as like, God, Rebecca does it all. They look at me as like, she's just another Latina who's in the business. And that's important. Find those people. Don't get caught up in their titles, you know, whether they're the news director of this or the general manager of that. You know, it can just be, or the president of this and the president of that. Don't get caught up with that. Just get caught up. And as long as they're, you know, what I say, as long as they're compassionate, they're creative, they're courageous. As long as they can inspire you, that's who you should clench onto. And I will say one more thing. Get rid of the Latinas who are users. I've had a few that I invested a lot in, and in the end, they cut my throat. But you know what? That's okay, because I know that, they're not in my circle anymore. So be aware of those too, because there are those ones that, it's that cliche about the crabs, they pull you down.
Yeah.
Even though you may push them up and help them, it doesn't mean they're going to be appreciative. So be careful of that. Because what I love today is look at all these women on here now. I look at all of you as leaders. I look at you as people that will inspire. And I look at you as people that will help our business survive. But if you're in it just for yourself, again, leave the business.
I'm loving it. You guys are such an inspiration, and I love to see Latinas, ready to speak up, no afraid. I remember before I met Mariana in person, I used to see her in videos, and I said, that woman, she just came from Venezuela, and look at her, like she owns the war. And I was attracted to that. She was presenting the book in Barnes and Nobles, and I went, and I said, I want to bring you to the Times. Can you come? So this is what we need. We need to see people doing the things that sometimes we are afraid to do. So thank you for that. And Natalie, I think we don't have that much time, so I would like to open it up for questions. We get to know some of the amazing people that we have in the panel. If you want to speak up, just raise your hands and open your camera, and you can ask your own questions. Don't be afraid. Remember all what the lady says. Rebecca said, don't be afraid, no fear. Ask your questions.
Exactly.
I know Kim had a question. Kim Haas, are you still on? If you'd like, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Kim.
Great panel. Thank you all so much. My question was about the lack of, or can you address what I see as a real lack of representation of the Afro-Latino? I'm actually producer and host of the PBS travel series, Afro-Latino Travels, which is currently on the air now. Thank you so much. But, it's disheartening. And I worked for Telemundo several years ago at the Philadelphia affiliate. But I have to tell you, it is disheartening to watch Spanish language television here in the US, and not see anyone who looks like me. And I think, was it Mariana mentioned, and all of you, I appreciate it, telling the stories that need to be told. That's why I came up with this idea of this travel show, to highlight and tell positive stories of Afro-Latinos. So are you all seeing any change, any movement? Because I must say, it's disgraceful.
I think, Kim, let me jump in here. First of all, my cousin's Afro-Latina, and she tells me the same things that happen. First of all, again, this is where Latinas have to help other Latinas. This is where I'm not an Afro-Latina, but I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to say, look around the newsroom and go, gosh, okay, we got Mexicans, we have the Latinas that look white. I mean, where are the Afro-Latinas? This is where we need to bring it up, because sometimes, I remember when I started, in the business, they were looking for the Latinas who look white. I remember an agent telling me, Rebecca, you have great experience, but they're looking for somebody with more, I go, what? More European features. I don't know what the hell that meant, but I was like, okay, what does that mean? I'm not going to go get a nose job, and I love my skin color, And so he's like, well, I go, what you're saying is they want someone who looks white? He goes, well, I don't want to say that, but that was it. So what's important, Kim, is that other Latinas, and you go and tell them, I hope you're part of my group, Latinas in Journalism and Wise Latinas, because we talk about it all the time, that we have to be advocates for each other, that we not only need to know that there's Latinas here, but are there Latinas of a variety? Are there the Afro-Latinas? Just because I'm in Dallas, Texas, do we have to fill the newsroom with just Mexicans? No. The Puerto Rican women are here. The Afro-Latinas are here. The Dominicans here. Why not? We have to advocate for each other, because I hate to say this, sometimes white managers, they just think we're all alike. And yes, because you may have, like my cousin, who have more of the African look, or maybe darker skin, they think, oh, they're Black. But they don't even realize, some of them don't even realize there's Afro-Latinas. I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it? So that's why I say our voice is important. And as you, I love that you created this show. I'd love to know more about it. I love you have created a voice. You have created a place where those stories can be told. Another thing that we should do is create those journeys, those avenues where we open the door for other Afro-Latinas like you have. I applaud you for that. And I hope that everybody decides to tell their bosses, hey, when was the last time we did a story on anybody in the Afro-Latino community? Thank you. I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in and say, in our mentorship program, we had a conversation because I looked at the roster of mentors and I was like, you guys, like, we don't have enough Afro-Latinas. And just like naming that, it's really important. Just like naming it, like this is an area where we need more representation. And we need more representation because like someone who looks like me can blend in pretty easily. If you take the Gonzalez-Ramirez away and you take out my accent, like I can be some like white girl from Brooklyn and like no one would look at me twice, right? So just like naming it in our communities and like really pushing at each other, like when we see instances of racism or discrimination at any time and calling each other out and be like, yo, that's not cool. Like, I think that is super important. Like in our program, we were very intentional. We want queer women to be part of it. We want moms. We want like, you know, women who are immigrants, women who are freelancers, just like having all this diversity of like identities. And when we sat down and looked, we were like, we're doing a great job, but we need more of this type of representation. We need more transgender women. We need more Afro-Latinas because their experiences are very different. And I think that if you're in a position of power and like, and not you, Kim, specifically, but like anyone here, just like seek out people because the talent exists out there. Like, it's not like you guys are not represented, right? Like the talent is out there. So we have to be very intentional about recruiting and looking for those people and bring them on and just like pulling a seat out in the table for them too.
Absolutely. Like Andrea said, and Rebecca said as well, like, first of all, the white executives see us all the same. We're all either Mexican to them or we're all just Latinas to them. They don't understand the nuances. It's up to us to really showcase authentically who we are. I think, like Andrea said, we need to call out the racism and the colorism that exists in our own community. When we hear things like, no, es que ella es morenita, que tiene el pelo malo, que si, no, o sea, we have to call those things out. And I agree with what you're doing, Kim. We have to give each other, we have to create those spaces for ourselves because nobody else is going to do it for us. I remember I worked at Univision with Ilia Calderon. So just seeing the effect that she has now with other little girls who walk into the newsroom and look at her. I mean, representation is just, it's so important. It's little ripple effects that turn into just huge waves. But it starts with shows like yours, Kim. So congratulations. And please place a link on there if you haven't so yet on the chat so we can all look at it and share it.
Yeah, definitely.
So
it's hard to believe that in 60 years, Univision only have one African-American anchor. 60 years. I don't know. I think it's worse in the Spanish media television. The racism, the classism, well, all of that got to change. I don't know if we have...
Yeah, we have 2 more questions. I just want to say that we are supposed to end at 1 p.m. Natalie here, NHA president, but I'm sorry, we're supposed to end at 8 p.m., but we have until 8:30. So if you guys want to stick around, if Rebecca, Mariana, Andrea, if you're able to stay for a little bit longer, because we're getting some really good questions, I'm sure our members would appreciate it. And the next question is from Steph Solis. Steph, if you could unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing all of this. I'm asking with the caveat that I missed the beginning, so perhaps my question was addressed, but I was wondering, for those of you who didn't have mentors or before you had mentors throughout your careers, how did you build on investigative skills and how did you manage to do maybe larger projects or investigative work that, at least in my experience, has traditionally gone to white men in the past?
So my TV station in Dallas just had a team of white people. That's what it was. A white female, a white producer, they were all white. And getting into that group at the Fox station here was nearly impossible. Because I think our reporter was, I think she was making like 150 grand, you know, and she only turned like 4 stories a year. And so breaking in there was basically, you had to come up with a story. And here's the little nugget that I give you. because in many TV stations, the first groups to go are the investigative teams. Knock them out, because that's a lot of money if they turn like 4 or 6 stories a year when they're supposed to have these big investigations, right? But, you know, what you can do, and what I did is, you know, of course, I would try to read up on every investigative reporter out there and find somebody, how did you do this? How did you do that? And remember, I started before social media and YouTube. So now you have everything right there. And when you reach out to some of these investigative reporters, I mean, they're flattered. And when anybody gets in touch with me, I'm flattered that you want to know anything. You know, let them know, hey, I follow your work. I like it. Can you give me some tips on how I ease into that journey? How do I cross into that? One of the things I did, I broke a big story about registered sex offenders who were mailmen. And it took me 6 months. First of all, I pitched the story to my boss. And she said, no, it's not a story. And I literally went to my desk and cried, because I knew that if it was the white girl who pitched it, they would have given it to her. And I remember a cameraman coming to me and saying, what's wrong? And I was just like crying. I mean, picture me crying, me, strong Rebecca Aguilar. And he says, listen, we can piece it together, because we worked on the weekends. And so we pieced together this great piece where these guys admitted to me on camera that they had molested girls and now they were delivering our mail. It's crazy. I'll give you guys a link. Anyway, so what happened, I pieced it together in 6 months. Like, I'd have a story and then I'd run over here to do an interview. I'd have a story and I'd run over here and get B-roll. And in 6 months, I put it together and I pitched it to the second boss, not this news director who turned me down, the assistant news director. And he looked at it and he was like, oh, geez, this is in the May book. Let's throw it in there. And it became the lead story that all the Fox affiliates took it. That's how big it was. And so if you have an investigation, you know, work on your story, but piece together the other one. And once you piece together something phenomenal, that you lay it all out, they're like, whoa, when did you work on this? Not only will they be impressed, but you have already started the journey into investigative reporting. Does that make sense to you, Steph? Yes? And let me tell you the last thing. Because this woman did not want me to have this story, and it turned out to be a big thing that even Geraldo Rivera picked it up for his syndicated show, that she came to me and said, hey, I'd like to enter it in the Emmys. And I said, no, I'll pay for it. It was $187 an entry, by the way. And I didn't go to Houston. I was like, you know, my team of 5 cameramen that helped me, they went. And I get the call, we won. And that was the biggest satisfaction, because I got an Emmy for a story a news director turned down because her white investigative team didn't have it first. And so that's the beauty of success. And that's the beauty of pushing forward. I hope I inspired you on that one.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I was gonna say, I dropped a link in the chat. I'm a 2019-2020 Ida B. Wells Fellow. And the purpose of this fellowship is to get like a pipeline going for journalists of color to be in investigative journalism, because you're right, like the majority of investigative journalists out there are white men. So of course they have a ton of blind spots. Applications are still open for that for I think another week. So that's a really good place to start. That fellowship changed my life. I was able to do this big investigation into domestic violence back home in Puerto Rico, and as a result, public policy change in the island. So just looking for those type of opportunities, and also asking questions. Like I get emails from people who are like, hey, how did you get to the position you're in today? So trying to do the same, just like identifying people in like newsrooms and that whose work do you like, and just shooting them a message and be like, yo, like you have, you know, a few minutes to get like on a phone call and talk a little bit about your work. And that will help you create kind of like a roadmap of where you need to go, because investigative journalism is a skill. So you need to do it in practice. But if you can, like, you know, map out like your your skills in a way and be like, okay, so to get this, I need to learn how to do this. Like you get like a FOIA request and I need to do A, B, C, and D. If you don't have that type of person in your own newsroom or in your own network, just seek someone out. Just like reach out to someone on the New York Times and be like, yo, like you have 5 minutes. And they're probably gonna say yes, because a lot of journalists love to talk about themselves, like as it's clear in this panel. So just like also like looking at people whose work you really admire and reaching out is like a good way to get started.
Absolutely. I would add, going back to when I was a part of the Univision investigative team, And then going back to Andrea, what you said, the first thing that I had to combat to be able to work in that team was my own imposter syndrome. I was like, ¿qué? I've never done any of this. Yo no voy a poder con esto. So I was the one sabotaging myself instead of like running with the huge opportunity that I had been given. So don't doubt your skills, but also be willing to do kind of little things, you know? I remember in the beginning, since I didn't feel adequate for the team, but I just wanted to learn from people like Gerardo Reyes, who was my boss. I was, you know, they needed somebody to drive from Miami to Orlando several times to get documents. I was like, I'll do it. Ida por vuelta, I'll do it. They needed somebody to, you know, either like tape some events that we knew were not going to be a part of like the full story, but they just needed it done and logged. And so I would just raise my hand to do all of these little things as long as I got a chance to learn from people like Gerardo, because as Andrea said, you need folks that are going to guide you. And my work on that team ended up winning Univision's first Peabody Award for an investigation called Fast and Furious. Or also something that I'll tell everybody on here, and especially for investigative, you know, they were all these weapons from that Obama era operations that had been lost basically in the system. And all the other investigative journalists, the white ones, were looking at the weapons from here until they reached the Mexican border. What happened to them after they crossed the border? Nadie le importaba. But we looked at it from the other side. We traced them from Mexico back to the United States, and we were able to find over 30 weapons that weren't even in the original investigation Congress conducted, because we looked at our own unique lens as Latinos and as people who knew the border and had inroads in Mexico, and what was different that we brought to the table. And even though we were like literally like a 5-person team, we beat out the bigger teams that had 10 times more resources than we did.
Great. Our next question is coming from Ambar Castillo. Ambar Castillo is part of the group that is creating the first podcast of our organization. They're working along with Pedro Rafael Rosado from the Times. Ambar, where are you? Open your camera. We want to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you all for the insights, inspiration, everything. Yeah, I just had a question speaking to what Andrea had mentioned earlier about sometimes being sent to do like all the immigration stories because you're Latina. I was wondering if any of y'all could speak to experiences where you were pigeonholed into, and I know we're speaking a lot about, you know, writing, reporting more diverse Latinx stories, but if you wanted to report on something that didn't fit into that mold of the Latinx story, or were about other communities and other beats, how you navigated that relationship with either your editors or with others, to not pigeonhole yourself in that.
I never look at it as being pigeonholed. I don't. Because let me just say, if you go into the Dallas News, you know, the Dallas Morning News newsroom, and, you know, I'm the Latina who can cover the Latino community, immigration. I can cover Cubans, Puerto Ricans. I can cover the Hondurans who come in. They're going to look at me as a blessing. And when it's time to cut people, they're going to go, no, we got to keep Rebecca. I mean, that woman can cover every community and speak Spanish and know the cultures. So I try to take out those things that could be negative to us and look at it as not a burden, but a benefit. As a Latina, you know, in every newsroom, I mean, I can tell you the people, I mean, they would come to me, hey, Rebecca, you know, can you listen to this soundbite? I don't know what they were saying. I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, God gave me the gift to be bilingual, of course, listen to it. Or at runtime, I mean, this is for real. My news director, my assistant news director in Dallas, like, hey, Rebecca, I gotta ask you a favor. I go, what? He goes, can you talk to my cleaning lady? This is the assistant news director. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, you know.
It happened to me many times.
You know, I need to tell her this, this, and this. Now I could look at it like, what the hell? I mean, really, you want me to do that? But on the other hand, I thought, this is the assistant news director. I do him a favor, I need a favor, right? I don't look at it like I'm pigeonholed, like, oh, okay, I need a Mexican, get over here. Tell me, help me. No, look at it like a benefit. Because in the end, when they start, like I said, laying people off, you have the benefit of being bicultural, maybe, bilingual, maybe, and being a Latina, the woman that they need over maybe the white guy that just has nothing to offer. You know what I mean? Now, I have in every city told them when I came into every city saying, hey, I'd like to cover the Latino community because I'm going to be the lead story, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, right? especially with these immigration stories. I mean, being a Mexican American, and obviously my parents were undocumented, I have an interest. But I think it's all Latinos, whether you're Mexican or not, or Guatemalan, whatever, we should have an interest in it. But I think that also, once they see that, wow, man, she's good at covering that beat, let me move her over to this beat, education, or let me move her the police beat, because she's thorough. So again, try not to look at it as like a burden, but look at it as a benefit. Because in the end, when they see that you're so damn good at covering one community, they're gonna realize, whoa, she's good at covering everything. And so, but I will say this, as a bilingual bicultural person, that when I negotiated my contracts for TV and they would say, hey, so we're paying so-and-so like, I'm just throwing out a number, 70,000 as a reporter. I'm like, oh, okay. Do they speak Spanish? No. Are they bicultural? No, okay. Well, son, I hope, that you're gonna at least give me at least 15, 20 grand more, because I'm gonna open you up to a whole different world. And they would be like, I never thought about that. And yes, usually I got like at least 10 grand more.
Oh, Rebecca, I wish I had you in as a negotiator for
But
me.
again,
Right?
but again, Mariana, it's about having the guts to ask. All they can do is say no. What happens with a lot of Latinas who are bilingual, bicultural, you don't ask for it. What are they gonna say, no? If they say no, then you move on or you take the job. But at least every time I ask, whether it was 10 or 15, KNBC gave me a signing bonus of 10 grand after I negotiated my contract. So I'm just saying, ask for it. All they can do is say no. But if you don't ask, they don't tell. So I hope that answered your question.
I was also gonna say, one thing I used to do when that happened is just like turn the story in their head. Like, oh, they want a little sad story about like an undocumented person who goes to college and it's afraid of Donald Trump, which is a really important story to tell, not the fullness of like who someone is, right? Like something that's one small part of their identity. It's not who they are. I would just change the story and just like deliver something else. Like just use whatever idea and stereotype they have in their minds as a jumping out point. Like when Hurricane Maria happened back home, like obviously my editors were like, oh, we need to cover this, like it's your family. And I was in such like a difficult emotional place, right? Because like this is like my home. I don't want to be writing something for clicks because I'm actually not able to communicate with my family. Like, what are you talking about? So when I finally had the space to heal in that way, they were like, oh, can you respond to Trump about this? And I was like, no, because like the government of the island is also failing people. Like, it's not these ideas that sometimes like our editors have, just like you can just push back a little bit against it and be like, well, you are expecting this boring story that has been done 1,000,000 times and that brings nothing new to the table. And I'm instead gonna give you this other thing, which is like new and interesting and portrays our community as like, the multiplicity of identities and life experiences that we have, right? So sometimes it sucks that you have to do like the Latino story, right? You're just like, here we go again. But if you can find creative ways of like pitch different stuff and like have conversations with your editors, like you are probably gonna come out with like really good stuff because you are the one who knows your community. They don't.
Absolutely. And I would also add, use your Latinidad to also show how good you can be covering all stories. For example, one amazing thing that we have is our empathy as Latinos. Having lived through what I lived through in Venezuela, what Rebecca lived through with her parents, what Andrea lived through coming from the island, and then what happened with Hurricane Maria, channel all that. I remember that, that's why they put me on the hurricane beat and the earthquakes and on the mass shootings, because after I was interviewing all these people, I would like hug them and I would tell them like, thank you for letting us into your home on what is likely the most difficult day of your life. And that's the empathy that really, that's what gets the viewer at home, where they feel like, wow, that could be my family. So bring that empatia that all of us have on here, that we bring to the table. Also, I think I agree with Rebecca in that it actually the opposite happened to me, where they didn't want me doing Latino stories in the beginning. They wanted me to do everything else but that. And I was like, but let me do what also let me do what I'm passionate about. I have so many sources. I mean, coming from Univision, imagínate, that was my bread and butter. And I'm like, let me show you what I can do. So it frustrated me in the beginning that I felt that I have to kind of like earn the right to cover our own community. Sometimes it just frustrated me to see like white people that didn't speak the language, that covered it on the surface, cover our stories. So when I finally got the right to do it, o sea, I just went with it and I never let it go. It's a huge privilege to be able to do it and to do it right.
Absolutely. Do we have more? I think we have more questions. If you have a question, just open your camera and open your mic. I saw a long list of questions, but now we're getting shy. Don't be shy. This is your chance to be with Mariana on stage, with Rebecca, and with Andrea. Well, if we don't have more questions, I would like to ask you a final advice for someone trying to break into the industry, especially now with all the uncertainty that we're having with the pandemic.
I would say 3 things. 1, diversify. You know, with my own production company now, if I would have said like, bueno, I work in TV, Mirna, my partner, also works in TV. TV está paralizado ahorita, so we're just gonna sit on this couch and not do anything. No, we said, what else can we do? We wanna tell Latino stories. Why don't we write a fiction novel about a young bicultural bilingual girl growing up in Miami today, for example? So that would be another way to represent Latinas on the bookshelves that doesn't exist right now. What if we, yes, told motivational speeches? What if we do another TEDx for Venezuela that needs it right now? That's another way of taking our message around the world. Like, just don't think that the traditional sort of media landscape is the only thing that's out there, because that's not true. Diversify in every way that you can. There's YouTube now, there's social media. There's so many ways to get your message out there, because then when you do get that chance, they're gonna ask you, bueno, ¿y tú qué has estado haciendo? And you need to showcase what it is you can do. Number 2, I would say, 1 is diversify. 2, be relentless. It's every day. Every day hay que dar un pasito hacia adelante. Doesn't matter if it's small. There are going to be days where you have imposter syndrome, where you think, oh my God, ¿qué estoy haciendo? But just keep moving forward. That's why we named our company Go Like It, in part, you know, because we're always moving forward no matter what. And lastly, I would say just be passionate about the community. Open, what Rebecca said in the beginning is so true. Whatever you put out there, you know, just pay it forward. It will come back to you. Open the room and create space for other Latinas. That's why today I'm so blessed to be with all of you. Please DM me on Instagram. I put my account on there. Anything you need, levantenme el teléfono. I'm here for you. Anything that I can help you with. I truly believe in that.
Thank you, Mariana.
I can go now. I think that finding your tribe, it's super important. Like that core group of people who are in this industry, and as Rebecca was saying earlier, are gonna be like kind of like your informal advisors, right? Like that advisory committee that you have. And those people are gonna keep you honest. They're gonna open doors for you. They're just gonna be like your rocks. Like sometimes when I'm having my worst day and I'm like, hey, why am I in journalism? Ay, soy terrible. Blah. Like those are the people who are like, Andrea, ya, se acabó. Like just cut it out. So having those people that are gonna like push you forward and really gonna support you, it's super, super important. Another thing is like, it's so cliche, but actually believe in your own abilities. Just like if you see that job that you're like, I'm not sure about, just like apply. Like it takes a second, you know, like, okay, maybe not because cover letters are horrible, but it doesn't take that much time to actually shoot your shot. And then who knows, like maybe that door will open for you. Mentioned that Ida B. Wells Fellowship earlier, and it seems so crazy to me. I was like, a story about domestic violence back home, like mainstream news outlets in the US don't give a shit about Puerto Rico. Sorry, I cussed up. And they don't care. So like this, who is gonna want to read this story, even though I know it's an important story? And look, I just like applied, got it, and it changed public policy back home. So just like really pushing forward when, even in your days that you're like, oh my God, I cannot do this anymore, it's super important. And also remember, like all of you probably have much more talent than a ton of like mediocre people out there. Like, so don't forget that about yourself, right? And yeah, I think that's my little speech. And get a mentor. Use our mentorship program if you want. I dropped the link earlier, and you know, we are there for you. Like, also, I dropped my Twitter. If you just want to send me a DM or an email, just feel free. I love talking with other Latinas. So
thank you, Andrea. Rebecca?
I think the main thing is just be unafraid. Unafraid to go and ask, I mean, whether you want to go through a mentoring program or you just want to find somebody, be unafraid to ask that person, hey, you know, can you be my mentor? And if they say, no, I don't have time, move on. There's hundreds of journalists out there. Be unafraid to write your own stories. I mean, the beauty of all of you, especially the ones who want to break into the business, is today we have YouTube. You have a phone that you can shoot a story on, the phone that you can start a podcast on and you know, put it on YouTube or wherever. These phones are phenomenal. You can write a blog to tell me a story about, you know, maybe an Afro-Latina that's, you know, opened a store somewhere in South Dallas and she's feeding the hungry, you know, at night. Everybody can be a journalist because you have the tools right there. So be unafraid to go and find the tool that will already set up your resume. So when someone like me says, hey, I think they're looking for an MMJ in Abilene, Texas, I can say, look at her work on YouTube. Be unafraid. Be bold. Be bold. Put yourself out there. You know, if you're on Twitter, okay, do I really want to see, you know, the latest outfit you're wearing? No. You know, I don't know how many times I see women, all ages, you know, they take a gazillion photos of themselves. I don't want to see that. I want to see, show me the community. Show me someone that you've done a story on. That's what's going to catch my attention. That's what will catch a news manager's attention. Look at this person telling a story through their social media. And more than anything, especially you who want to break into business, don't be afraid to go and say, hey, go to your local radio station and say, look, you know, I want to learn this. Or go to your local community paper and say, hey, look, I have a story here. I have a story. And if they say, well, we can only pay $40, okay, do it. And in fact, I was going to show you, I don't know, oh, I thought I had it. Oh, here it is. Here's a story I did. See, here, let me put it up there. This little girl, see, una mexicanita. You see her? I was driving through a neighborhood. Okay, this is a community paper. I was driving through a neighborhood and I saw this little mexicanita selling her artwork. And I thought, oh my God, I jumped out of my car, took some pictures. I called my friend who has this little community paper. I said, I think I have a story for you. She's like, okay. I sent her this picture. Look at that little mexicanita. She's so cute. And it made the front page. And you know what? I gave her this story. I gave my friend Cheryl this story because it was about my community. It was about this little girl. But you know what? If I was someone with no experience, understand, I have 40 years of experience. I have a lot. But if I was a college kid or someone that didn't have experience, believe me, this story would get me a job at the Dallas Morning News or maybe at Nora's, you know, in the San Antonio. So be willing to find those stories. And if you have to give them away in the beginning, go ahead, do it. Because look, I made the front page, not because it's me, but because this little mexicanita, J. Lee Molina, is one kick-ass child. And that's what made the story. So that's my advice. And if you need anything, you know where to find me. I'm on Twitter, I'm everywhere.
Mariana, Andrea, Rebecca, thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. It has been amazing. And I want to thank our president, Natalie Nieves, and Bianca Silva from our board for helping to put this together. Stay in touch because we're coming with a podcast. We're coming with amazing events and conversations. So a lot of great things are happening. Thank you so much.
Gracias a todas, son increíbles.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Buenas noches. Thank you.
Chao.
Ah, qué lindo.